Whoa.
Lighting the kitchen sink on fire, that's that indelible image that comes to mind for a lot of people when you just mention the word hydrofracking. Well, that now notorious clip we just showed you, it's from Josh Fox's film Gasland. And we'll be talking to Josh in just a little bit. But first, we continue now with our RFL Special Investigation into hydrofracking. As I told you last night, the stakes, they couldn't be higher. On one hand, you've got gas companies saying that hydrofracking will go a long way to help solve the energy crisis in America, and it'll put those Americans back to work as well. And you've got the president, who believes natural gas is a pretty good idea. You've also got New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo, who walked into office saying, let's get on with this already. So with that as a political backdrop, tonight we make our focus on the environmental and the health concerns surrounding hydrofracking. And our reporter Kim Lengo, who led this investigation, she joins us now with more on that. Kim?
Yeah, Rich, tonight we are headed back to Dimock, and a town that's been so divided over gas drilling, the two sides describe the fight as a civil war. On the one hand, there's people who claim the health consequences of hydrofracking are so severe it contaminated the water and left them unable to have children. On the other hand, there's people who say it's the best thing that ever happened to Dimock. But no matter which side you speak to, everyone agrees it has completely changed their community.
Turned into a civil war, neighbor against neighbor.
It's pretty sad and scary, because what's next?
The goal would be to stop this. It's insanity. What they're doing is so unbelievable that when you tell people what they're doing, you look like a liar.
In rural Susquehanna County, in the tiny town of Dimock, residents complain that natural gas drilling has ignited a civil war. Enough is enough! In a town where almost every property owner has signed a land lease with the drilling industry, it's pitted neighbors who are pro-gas against neighbors who are upset with the problems they say the gas industry's caused.
We're a sound community, we're a happy community, and the water here is fine.
Bill Aleo is the spokesman for Enough is Enough. The pro-drilling group says the natural gas industry is the best thing that ever happened in Dimock, and they're tired of getting negative attention for living in drilling country.
The rest of us in the township really don't think there is a problem here. We are not a ghost town, we are not a problem area. But I'm sure if you've spent time over on Carter Road, that's not the story you're getting.
Over on Carter Road, 11 families with tainted water wells were receiving daily deliveries of water from Cabot Oil and Gas for close to 3 years. Deliveries began after the company was blamed for polluting the family's drinking water. Cabot denies responsibility.
We've never had the problems on Carter Road until they showed up.
Dusty Carter and his family have lived on Carter Road since his paternal grandparents began farming there decades ago. This well was drilled and fracked right outside Dusty's living room window, but he's not receiving clean water from Cabot.
What I have to say to the gas industry, God forbid if one of their kids can't have kids, like my wife can't. That's what I have to say to them.
At the point where my neighbor told me that her water smelled funny, in that same conversation, it all of a sudden came to mind that my kids have been getting sick.
Pat Fernelli is a newspaper reporter living just a few hundred feet from Dusty on Carter Road. She's not receiving clean water from Cabot either. She says her children are suffering.
Very heavy-duty stomach cramps. That was what they were complaining about the worst, is they would feel like somebody kicked them in the stomach. Sometimes they would go down on the floor on their hands and knees and groan.
Pat says she and her kids have even been trying to shower less and less because sometimes it's just too painful.
One of my daughters seemed to be the one that affected with the skin the most. And she was in there taking a shower one night, and she came out and she was extremely upset. And she said, "My scalp is burning. My scalp is on fire. I don't know what the heck is going on, but my scalp is burning." And she was just like beside herself.
Oh, it's so hard to say what's the worst part of it because there's so many bad parts of it.
Susan Breeze is a construction worker living in nearby Lenox Township. A water test done by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection in 2008 and then repeated by an independent test company in 2010 shows levels of toxic chemicals so high, if her kitchen faucet were a public water source, it would be shut down.
I'm showering in barium. It goes into your bone eventually. I'm 50 and I'm saying, okay, well maybe I'm going to have cancer when I'm 60 or 70. It's full of toxic.
Susan believes the water on her block became contaminated after a neighbor allowed a gas company to drill on his property.
It's contaminating everybody's wells, and some people are getting bought off by it. They put a well on their property, and the gas industry is paying them money to keep their mouth shut, so people don't know that their water is contaminated also.
I know that the United States wants this gas because it's going to help everybody, but is it right to do it at the expense of all the health of the American citizens?
The industry has long stressed that fracking and water contamination have never been definitively linked. But for the first time this December, after a 3-year study in a remote valley in central Wyoming, the Environmental Protection Agency said that chemicals used in hydrofracking were the likely cause of contaminated water supplies. Tom Dara, an independent medical geologist with Duke University, is trying to get to the bottom of what's happening to the water on Carter Road. Dr. Dara's results have already shown high concentrations above EPA drinking water standards for toxic metals like iron, manganese, and arsenic. Dr. Dara's trying to figure out if it's occurring naturally or can be traced back to hydrofracking.
Is it coming from drilling process? Is it coming from poor characterization of the actual geology, the way the folds and faults and sort of subsurface geology is here?
Dr. Dara says science is offering very few answers at this point, and more research needs to be done.
Or if it's coming from, the fact that hydraulic fracturing is inherently, dangerous. And I think that really where the research needs to go is determine that, is fracking a problem, or do we actually just need to improve the engineering and geological characterization before we start drilling? I still actually think it's possible to do it safely. I think that there are clearly areas where it either was not done safely or the geology inherently was not safe for that.
He's like a savior to me. Nobody else would test my water, and he volunteered, his services, because I can't afford to have my water tested. I mean, and DEP just washed their hands of this area and left myself and a neighbor lady to expect that our water is good, and it's not. Clearly not, and I really appreciate it. I owe him a lot.
I can't speak for everybody, but I think we've all learned a hard lesson.
Pat Fernelli says hydrofracking hasn't been the gold rush she was promised. She says she's thankful that the industry is employing her truck driver husband. He drives to Oklahoma every week. Makes good money, she says, but the job offers no health benefits. As far as the royalties she's been paid for the natural gas under her property, Pat says it doesn't come close to the expenses they've endured for their poor health.
Let's just say we've been able to qualify for assistance while receiving royalties because it wasn't enough.
Now, among all the health problems these people are alleging, they're also embattled in a bitter lawsuit. About a dozen families on Carter Road have sued Cabot Oil and Gas, alleging that the company contaminated their water through fracking. Cabot denies responsibility, but as we mentioned, Cabot was trucking in fresh water for the families for the last 3 years. Those deliveries stopped this past November after state regulators stepped in and said Cabot fulfilled its obligation to the families. The residents still say their water is contaminated. Rich?
Kim, explain for me, and I'm sure a lot of the audience, how is it that neighbors feel so differently about something that's in so many of their backyards?
Well, the biggest point here, and something that was a learning lesson for me through this, was that you don't have to have a drilling rig or you don't have to have active fracking going on your property to be affected by this. All of the people that you saw in the piece, the drilling rigs were on their neighbor's property, or the fracking had gone on maybe a mile down the road, because in many cases the wells are drilled 2 miles deep and a mile out. So just because your property may be touching this, these people are alleging they're also affected by it.
Now, in terms of who's getting paid and who's not, explain that.
Well, every person you saw in this piece had signed a lease with a gas company, and our first instinct was to ask, isn't this hypocrisy? How can you sign a lease with a gas company, not get paid from it, or not get paid what you expected to get paid, and then allege that there's all these health concerns. Well, many of them told us that the reason for signing a lease was for protection, because they believe that with signing a lease with a company, that if something had gone wrong with their water, that the company would then be responsible to make them whole again or deliver fresh water like what we saw on Carter Road.
Now, Kim, I know last night was only the first part in our series that's obviously going to end with our special coming this Thursday, but you've already gotten response from what we ran last night. It's already making an impact.
Yeah, from what we aired last night, we showed our rig tour with Cabot Oil and Gas, and during the tour on Elk Lake School, we smelled something, and we weren't quite sure what it was. We asked the gentleman who was giving us a tour, and we called Cabot later. They said it was not methane and it was not mercapt, and they're not sure what the odor was. And we got a call this morning from a group of concerned citizens. They say they're taking that footage to the Pennsylvania DEP, Department of Environmental Protection. They have a meeting with Secretary Krancer there, and they're going to show him that footage.
Amazing. And again here, we're only in day 2 of our series. Now, as a reminder, everyone, this is not just an issue for Pennsylvania. Obviously, this is an issue that New York State and, trust me, more places in our region are going to have to struggle with, the pros and the cons of what is a evolving technology. So we're bringing you at home into our conversation because this will impact you in one way or another. So here's our question for you. Do you think the economic benefits of fracking outweigh the risks? And you can tell us how you feel on this by sending us your comments, and we've dedicated a new page here on our website exclusively to this as it relates to hydrofracking. Just go to rnntv.com/hydrofracking. It is time now to reach into the mailbag and see what some of you have already been saying. And let's start off with Fred, who writes the following. It depends on how rigorously the industry is regulated. If we apply good ideas developed elsewhere, we can control the rate of development, avoid the worst environmental and cultural downsides, and reap some of the benefits. The key is to moderate the pace and scale of drilling activities. And Kim, you've been getting some comments also directly to you via Twitter.
Yeah, that's right. The Twitter is blowing up, and we want to remind people to keep them coming. But we heard from Vera Scroggins. She writes, neighbors are pitted against each other, the ones that are strongly pro-gas and those upset with the problems with gas drilling. Vera is from Montrose, Pennsylvania, which is the same area right next to Dimock. She also wrote us another tweet saying contaminated water is a major concern. We have heavy metals, methane, petrochemicals, industrial toxins in the water. And we also got this third tweet from Dennis Shavita, who's involved with the Sierra Club. Dennis wrote, watched all the video, looked at the pics, you're getting plenty of info out there, keep it going. And for you at home, you can tweet me at any time. Tweet me on Twitter at Kim Langle, of course on Twitter, and like Dennis said, we will keep this going.
And you know, Kim, from those comments, you were telling me afterwards, you've gotten response from both sides after they viewed part 1 last night, and they're both really happy with their portrayals, thinking it may swing some of those undecideds out there. Make it clear, everybody, I'm never shy about where I stand on a particular issue. I'm conflicted about this one. You yourself, after spending time there in Pennsylvania and hearing from everybody from the environmentalist side to the industry side, this is not a slam dunk either way,
no,
so we want more of these comments to keep coming in, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Now, we're going to bring you these special reports on this controversial drilling method every day this week. Then Thursday, we've assembled some of, as we said, the leading experts, environmentalists, as well as also a few famous faces to help us shed more light on what is an important issue, not just in Pennsylvania, but as I said, in New York and even nationally here. Now, when we come back right after this quick break, we're going to hear from filmmaker Josh Fox. We're going to ask him about his recent arrest on Capitol Hill and, of course, about his documentary, Gasland. That and a lot more after this break, so stay with us.